welcome to the Be Elite podcast. Today we're going to be talking about AI, which is why we have our guest, Dr. Laura Spencer, who is our Chief Academic Innovation Officer. So thank you for joining us. And my first question is, what is AI?
All right, starting with the big questions. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So AI is artificial intelligence. And the idea behind AI is, can we make a computer mimic a human brain? So what's important to understand is there's also a thing called machine learning. So we can teach machines how to do things. But the difference with artificial intelligence with AI is, can we make it seem as if they are human? All right. So, I can teach a robot to go in circles and to pick up trash, and that's machine learning. But if I can teach the robot to say, how was your day today? Or, oh, I see that it's raining outside. Would you like me to mop the floor in addition to sweeping and such, right? That's the difference between artificial AI and machine learning. It's constantly learning and adapting and trying to act like you or I might act in conversations with each other. So that's kind of like this much of what artificial intelligence is.
Well, thank you for that explanation. It makes so much more sense now, like to me and everything. And it does sound a little scary though. And so I'll hand it off to Elisa, who has a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think AI will be more advanced in the future?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, really, AI's been around for a long time. So what you need to understand is this has been happening behind the scenes for many years. A lot of times, if you go on a website and a little chat bot comes up and says, "How may I help you today?" That's a form of AI that's been around. But as we have what's called open source, where more people can get involved with helping AI become smarter, it's going to keep on growing. And what's happening right now is, because they've made it available to you and me, now a lot of people are jumping in saying, hey, I can make a version of that, or I can take like ChatGPT and I can make it do this thing for me. So it has no choice but to get more advanced in the future. The question is going to really be, how advanced are we willing to let it become, right? Because remember, this is like the human brain. So as you're growing up, you're getting smarter, right? You're in school, you're learning, you're getting smarter. So is AI. So at some point, humans have to decide, is enough enough? Are we going to stop AI from advancing anymore, or are we going to let it go and just see what happens with it? So I definitely think it's going to get way more advanced. By the time you're probably 30, Mr. Smith and I are probably not even going to understand what it's capable of anymore, because we'll be much older. Your world's going to be so different than the world that we grew up in.
I feel like it's always changing. It's always changing. I remember I never even knew what ChatGPT was like a couple of years ago. So how do you use AI though? Like, and because you said it continue advancing, like people are using it themselves. So how are they using it themselves?
So I think there's just so many ways that people are using AI now. The most basic way, the things that most people have heard of is ChatGPT, right? Because that was kind of the first one to open its doors to everybody. And ChatGPT at its basis is it'll help you do whatever. So if I want to send an email to you all after this podcast to thank you for having me on your show, I can tell ChatGPT to write the email for me, right? And it'll formulate it for me. I can tell it to be super formal, to be super friendly. I can tell it to include emojis, right? I can tell it to write it in Japanese. And so at a basic level, that's what ChatGPT does for you. But what's happening now is people are also using it for photos. So for example, like I have an Instagram account and I have a picture, and maybe I want just this part of the picture. And so I could tell AI to create a different background for me. I can tell it, hey, my dog is in this picture, but can you take my dog out and put a cat in the picture instead? Right. So now what's happening is when I was growing up, we were told, well, if it's in a photo, it must be real, right? Photos don't lie. Remember that, Mr. Smith? We were always told that growing up. Well, now photos do lie because AI is changing the photos for us. You can ask AI to create presentations for you. You can ask AI to look at your data and analyze the results for you. I mean, I don't know what it can't. I mean, look at Tesla's, it's driving your cars for you, right? I mean, there's just so much that it's doing. It's really about making ethical decisions about how we're using it. So if you could think of anything that is like a process that you want to streamline, AI can do it for you. I think last year, the Khan Academy came out with math tutors via AI. And it's actually a really cool program because it won't tell you the answer. AI is actually not very good at math. We could talk about that in a minute, but AI is not very good at math. It knows how to do math. It just is very bad at computating math. So if you go in there and you say, I don't understand the Pythagorean theorem, it can walk you through the steps. And as you're doing it, it'll say, okay, Seth, here's where you're stuck. Let's try it this way. And you can do it, right? And it'll say, oh, good job, Seth. Or, okay, Seth, I see where you're going wrong. Let me back you up a little bit and take you over here, right? So again, it's not really what it can do. It's kind of the question now is like, oh my gosh, what can't it do? Right? Every day, I think people are coming out with new tweaks to what AI is possible of and creating new ways that they can use it. It even does voices now. So you can actually have a conversation, kind of like Alexa or Siri or whatever it is that you use, but it's crazy how much it'll interact with you and talk to you now. You can have a new best friend and it could just be an AI robot.
It sounds like a completely different world, like we're going into, and like a completely.
It was science fiction when I was a kid, right? And we were talking about this before we started recording, but when movies like Terminator came out and they were talking about, oh, you know, the artificial intelligence taking over the world, or what is it, iRobot with Will Smith came out a while ago, right? And they always become evil, right? They always have to protect humans from humanity. But we joked and we said, oh, that's so crazy. And really, we're at that point now where, not that they're taking over the world, but where their capabilities are what used to be science fiction for us. And that's what happens a lot of times with science fiction. Science fiction becomes science fact. You know, as people say, oh, that's kind of a neat idea. I'm gonna make that happen. Or Ready Player One, Seth put in the chat. That's another great example of AI in movies.
It just makes you think, like, what do we have now that science fiction that could be possibly actual fact in the future? But
Yeah.
now I'd like to. Oh, yeah, and so thank you for giving us like some ideas about like how people are using them. So I want to open up to everybody, saying, how do you use it personally in your lives right now, AI? For me, I just used it, I think, once in Canva, where they're like, how do you make it a little bit more formal? And so that's because I'm a little scared of using AI. But
Canva's a
what about
great
you?
way to use it, though, Sunila. I'm glad you brought up Canva. So I had a friend who was adopting like puppies or something. I can't remember. And she had the picture, but she's like, "Could you make it look better?" Because there were puppy pads all in the picture, right? Which is not a good way. You want to say, hey, you want to adopt this puppy that's obviously peeing everywhere, right? So I could take that out and I put in a beautiful rug. And I didn't need to know anything. I didn't need to know how to edit that picture. I just told Canva, fix this for me, and it did.
Oh yes, Canva's amazing. Like Mr. Smith knows all about it.
I know he's selling quite a few things too.
I was going to bring that up, that yeah, like Dr. Spencer said, it makes it so easy for you to go in there and do these simple photo retouches, and there's things that aren't so simple. You know, you can select a background and change the color. You can do so much in there, photo editing, magic erasers, and it makes it easy. I used to use Photoshop and Illustrator all the time, and I can't tell you the last time I opened up Photoshop, because I can do it all in Canva using their magic AI tools. So.
And their magic document that does the writing, right? Where you can tell it, here's what I'm trying to write, here's what I'm trying to put together, and it'll help you put that together.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, Canva's one of those positive ways.
Yeah, I'm curious how else you're using AI out there.
Yes. So just anyone can open up and they could say like, oh, Lisa, like, how are you using AI?
Yeah, I use it on Canva a lot. Like as Mr. Smith and Miss Spencer said, like I would find a picture and then I'll be like, oh, I don't really like how that thing's in it, but I love everything else. So I'll just erase that and add something else to replace it.
Is anybody using it to help with their writing, with schoolwork? Tiana,
I saw a hand
no one will
up.
admit it.
I saw one hand up, and I appreciate your honesty.
I use it for writing because just for the grammar part of it, I don't like writing. I know some people like writings and stuff, but it's not my thing. I just yeah.
And that's okay, right? Like somebody put in the chat, Grammarly. Grammarly is a form of AI. You know, it'll check your writing, but you can also ask it to help you. Again, you can ask Grammarly, can you help me make this more formal? I teach college students as well, and I tell them before they turn in their essays to put their essay in to ChatGPT, to give it the prompt, right? So let's say the prompt said, write an essay comparing Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet to 10 Things I Hate About You, right? Or something like that. You can put the prompt into ChatGPT and you can say, read my essay and tell me if I did a good job answering the question, and ChatGPT will tell you, hey, you might want to put some more examples in here. It's not writing it for you, but it's just letting you know. So before submitting it to your teacher, you can ask it, how do you think I did? So, for those of you who aren't big fans of writing, that's a way of not cheating, because you're not asking it to write the essay for you, but you are asking it for feedback on your essay.
Yeah, it is good because then it's like if you don't have anybody to like look over it, like example, like I've been doing like essays like in the middle of the night. I can't just randomly message one of my friends, hey, read this essay for me,
Right.
make sure it's stuff. You just have
Mm-hmm.
the chat GPT.
Mm-hmm.
And I see in the chat, Xavier said that he's using his human brain
Which
at
is,
the moment.
as you should. And here's the thing, since that's a great point. AI should never replace your human brain, right? AI has a lot of limitations. We can talk about a lot of areas where it's going to go wrong. You are the final source of knowledge. So even if you ask ChatGPT, hey, will you look this over for me? Or will you help me write this email to my teacher? You have to make the ultimate decision as to, does it represent you, right? Is it accurate? I've asked it to answer questions for me, to explain things for me, and sometimes it's not quite right. It's doing the best it can, but I mean, honestly, it's kind of like you as teenagers, right? We, as adults, we joke that teenagers think they know everything, and then we get older, right? And we learn that we don't know everything. AI is kind of the same way. It thinks it knows everything, but it doesn't. So I'm glad you're using your human brain, because we have to be the ultimate source to say, yeah, you got it right, or no, you did not.
Yes, I
Yeah,
also believe like.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'll go after.
Well, I was just going to bring up. I had spoke to one of my buddies. He owns a comic book company, and he said the same thing. I asked him like, so how's AI impacting the industry? And he said, well, there will be no replacement for the human voice. And he sees people submit their scripts and whatnot, and he can spot AI a mile away. So I wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Spencer. Like there's no replacement for what we as human beings, our thoughts and our emotions. Because you could tell AI, hey, write me a movie about this. But if you're writing about something you went through, your emotion is what is going to show through, not what AI can just generate. So
right. And
definitely,
that's why it's artificial, right? It's not real intelligence. It's artificial intelligence. It can never, I shouldn't say never, who knows, but right at this point, it cannot replicate emotion, and it cannot replicate your experiences. So when people ask it to write recipes, people are like, oh, this is kind of a weird recipe, or people will say, create a Starbucks commercial, and you read them and you kind of laugh, right? It's doing the best it can, but again, if your favorite grandma's recipe that just makes you so happy, it's not gonna be able to do that, because it can't bring like the love of the food into it, right? It can only just analyze and say, well, most people who make things put these things in it. So
That's like leading off of like what I was gonna say about like how it doesn't have emotions, especially like with little children. When you teach little children, AI can't teach them.
right.
Like very little kids, because they get frustrated and they need someone who is patient and will be there with them. And sometimes every child learns differently. So I feel like every time you're teaching a child, you realize, oh, that's how they learn better. So you have to
Right.
word it that way, or you have to
Right.
change it. And AI is just going to do one simple way.
Right.
So which
And
brings me to a question is,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, how is AI impacting education then, and how we are taught differently from when you guys were taught?
So when Mr. Smith and I were taught, it was before any internet, right? So if I'm sitting with you and you and I are talking, and we're talking about like the Oregon Trail, and I think, oh, I don't know, or I think it was this, the only way that you and I knew if it was true was somebody had to stop what they were doing, go to the library, get an encyclopedia, look up the Oregon Trail, and get the information. And then our teachers would say, I want you to write a report about the Oregon Trail. And I don't know about Mr. Smith, but if you could find the rarest encyclopedia, you could probably copy half of it without being caught, because nobody else used the same source as you, right? It was like harder to tell it if we were plagiarizing, because there were so many books out there. But knowledge was only available to those who had the time and the resources to go get it. It wasn't available to everybody. I had to have my parents take me to the library, drop me off, or go inside with me and look up the information, right? So if you didn't live near a library, you just had to trust whatever I said because you weren't able to look it up for yourself. So schoolwork back then was very kind of, I would say, boring in some ways, because it was very like, here's the information. We trusted what our teachers said because we assumed they knew it all, because we didn't have access to anything different. So if my teacher said that the Oregon Trail happened in 1975, I would just believe them because, I didn't have time to go to the library and look it up. So as you're growing up with the internet, you have access to any information. You could be in the middle of dinner and look something up and completely change the conversation because of what you're learning. So education started having to change, right, in a good way, because what we realized was now it's not about the knowledge, it's about what you do with the knowledge. So when Mr. Smith and I grew up, it was a lot of, can you just regurgitate? Can you tell me what you already heard and say it back to me? We memorized facts, we memorized people, we memorized the 50 states and their capitals, like all these things. Now you look it up. So now it's, what do you do with the knowledge? Then AI came along and AI said, well, guess what? I'll tell you what to do with the knowledge. So now what's happening is education's changing again. And so what we're realizing is what you said earlier, the machines cannot create emotion, right? They're not creative. They're not critical thinkers. They're not compassionate. All those 6 C's that elite wants you to have. They're not curious, but you are. So now what we're trying to do in education is teach you how to be those things. How can you be curious with the knowledge? How can you be critical thinkers with the knowledge, right? And so it's like this evolution is happening and you all are in the middle of it because you're kind of stuck in where we were and you're also heading to where we're going. So for those of you who are younger, it's kind of exciting. For the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see a big change, I think, in how your courses operate, because it's going to be a lot more of asking you to create new things with the knowledge that you've been exposed to versus can you prove to me that you have the knowledge. I know like even elite teachers right now are trying to rethink the questions they ask you, because before they might have asked you, what are 3 reasons for the stock market crash in 1929? And you could write an essay about that. But now what they're asking you is like things like, based on what's happening in the economy today, do you think we'll have another stock market crash like in 1929, right? They're asking you to think critically about the information instead of just saying it or saying, make a poster about it, right? Now they're like, how can you use that information to make the world a better place, to think curiously, to think critically, right? And make life better, because we have to make sure, honestly, that we keep AI in its place. And the only way we're going to do that is to make sure that you all are critically thinking about the future and have like ethics and just have like strong understanding. So you make good choices, because Mr. Smith and I are going to be old and we're going to be counting on you to make good choices in the world. So we have to make sure that we've given you those skills to do it.
So, like, you know how you said that you guys are just hoping that we make the good critical choices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're seeing more people use AI to mimic people's families' voices to ask, oh, can you give me your cash or give me your bank account number? Well, we're already starting to go in a bad way for that, and
We are.
we don't know how it's gonna turn out. Like, maybe it might go into more detail for your voice, and
Mm-hmm.
you really did get scammed. Like, just say like, oh, I'm in the hospital. Like, even make a realistic, like the most realistic picture ever,
Mm-hmm.
and showing them in the hospital, and they could literally believe that. And once they do,
yeah, that's the scary part about any technology, right? Is there's always going to be people who use it for bad. And so, in fact, I just saw a news article the other day about somebody who like called and said, I'm in the hospital and, I need help. But that's why critical thinking is so important, right? So like, well, it's so weird that my aunt's calling me from the hospital. Why would she need Target gift cards at the hospital, right? Let me hang up and call her back. And, and so teaching you again, like to think through situations and say, is this correct? When I was growing up, it was viruses that were sent via email, and different things that would crash your computers, right? There's like always going to be people who use new technology for evil because so many of us don't understand it yet. So we're behind the curve. So that's why I think we're really hopeful that if we can teach you to stay curious, you're going to stay on top of it and hopefully not be as fooled as some of the others.
Because I do know they're making things like cybersecurity and more departments like that for
Yeah.
that reason.
It's a huge
And
growing field.
It is. And I thank you for sharing your opinion earlier about education and showing us your side. I want to open it up to like the students saying, how do you think AI is affecting your education? How do you see it changing? Because for me personally, I see that there is a lot more opinion work and a lot more difference work. So what do you guys think?
Mhm.
AI is definitely making the work easier for us, but it's also making it harder in another way, as in you're forced now to do more critical thinking than you were probably when you were in Miss Spencer's grade at that year.
Yeah, I hope so.
And do you guys see a difference in more writing assignments or more quizzes or anything in that matter? I do see more writing assignments.
Yeah,
I see a lot more writing assignments and quizzes than I used to get.
Are the quizzes kind of asking you to think deeper about something, or are the quizzes more, do you remember the facts that were told? I'm just curious.
It's more like wanting me to think more in depth with something than like how I used to. It just told me, oh, what did you do last week or did before or yesterday? No, now I want you to do more depth. And then for my writing assignments, I feel like now I had to only do like 4 or 5 sentences. Now they want like 6 to 7.
It's amazing to
For
see how
example,
much
if
is
you
changing.
go into, like,
Oh, go ahead.
Mr.
Sorry.
Bunn's class, they have their own like questions that they make up on their own, so that way no student can use AI to get ahead of the grade or get caught up with something with having an A and then also be cheating at the same time. So they're making new questions out of their own human brains.
It's hard to stay on top of it. Definitely giving your teachers a run for their money and making sure that they're staying one step ahead, or trying to. I'd say we're about half a step ahead.
And then at this point in time, you could literally ask AI to hack and like just go into the school's like the grading system and just change a grade and whatever grade you want. And at this point, I feel like more writing assignments are being used by AI, like essays, because it's easier to say, oh, ChatGPT, give me a full-on essay about George Washington and how his life was lived. And it's just written right there. Just copy and paste into your assignment. That's it.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be careful, right? Because so I don't know how much you know about AI and machine learning, but AI only knows what it has access to, right? So different AI machines have to be fed information. So if you think about ChatGPT 3.5, the old version, now there's 4, but 3.5, I think it only had knowledge up until about 2020. So they took all the knowledge of things they could pull off the internet, which is like more than we can ever possibly imagine, and they dumped it into this machine and said, learn from this. But things that have happened the last few years, it doesn't have access to, right? It's not a Google search. It's not continually learning. It was given information to learn from, and then that was it. So things like George Washington, you might be okay because we don't have a lot of new knowledge about George Washington. But if you asked it, I don't know, about climate change, or you asked about something that's been going on the past few years, it doesn't have the latest information. So it fills in the holes based on what it thinks would be correct. The other piece where AI gets it wrong is if you tell AI, hey, write me an essay about George Washington and include 3 resources for me, give me 2 YouTube videos and 3 books. A lot of times it makes up those resources because it doesn't actually perform a Google search. So then your teacher is going to say, but that book doesn't even exist. So you have to be careful, and you have to, again, remember we talked about earlier, you have to double check what it tells you, because they call it hallucinations, and there's a new word for it they're not using anymore, but it fills in the holes, right? It wants to make you happy, So it's going to give you something, even if it's not right. It's going to say, well, here's my best effort at giving you information. And then you turn it in and your teacher says, where did this come from? Or let's say you had to write an essay on the Hunger Games. And so you asked ChatGPT to write an essay on the Hunger Games, but it got confused and it wrote an essay about the third book. And you only read the first book in class. Your teacher should say, wait a minute, that's not even in the book that we're reading. So you have to, I'm not trying to tell you all how to cheat, but you have to be super careful with the information that you get from ChatGPT, because like I said, it's not right. It's guessing, it's trying to like figure out what should be the answer. And that's why it's bad with math, because it's not a computation machine. There is one, Wolfram Alpha, which is an AI computational machine, but that's more machine learning. But AI doesn't do computations because it's just trying to take knowledge and digest it and regurgitate it out to you in new ways. So it's not good if you tell it, give me 5 + 5 + 10 + blah, 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 blah. It gets confused. Likewise, I don't know if you've tried this, but when you're in Canva and you ask it to create images, sometimes you'll see it does it wrong. So have you ever noticed like a hand has 6 fingers, or there's like a weird foot somewhere? Or I asked it to create a car and it doesn't know how to put the lettering on the front of the car that says Land Rover. It had like weird lettering. It doesn't know how to do that stuff, right? So it has some obvious limitations. And when you're a student, you got to really think about like, is this a good way for me to go? Maybe it's an easier way for me to get my work done, but is this ethically a good decision? Am I using my critical thinking when I'm doing this? Maybe it gets me out of this one assignment right now, but what's going to happen down the road when I don't have this information for something else? So was it worth taking the chance of cheating and not writing my George Washington essay? But now down the road, when we're talking about the upcoming presidential election and we're trying to compare past presidents to current presidents, and I don't know, because ChatGPT wrote my essay for me, maybe it wasn't worth taking that shortcut.
Yeah,
Like,
totally. There's been countless times where I've like used AI or something and I've asked it to do something and it's given me like 6 fingers on one hand. I'm like, what the heck? How did that get in there?
It does some weird things.
Yeah. What are some positive ways that you can use AI, and what are some ways that you just shouldn't use it?
So I'll tell you one thing you should never do with AI. You should never put your personal information into AI, right? Remember, AI is constantly, it's learning from what is being provided. So never give it like your phone number or your name, things like that, because what it does is it's not only learning for you, it's learning for everybody else. So I don't want it to take my personal information and somehow give that to Mr. Smith in something else, right? And actually, a lot of authors are saying they don't want their books in AI anymore, because if all the Hunger Game books are in AI and then I ask it to write me a story, it's using from that to create a story, right? So people are saying you're kind of stealing my ideas because it's not your own. So I would say for ways you shouldn't use it, don't ever use it with anything personal of yours, right? Be very careful of what you feed into AI. Positive ways to use it. Honestly, I use it a lot for emails. And I know that's like an older person thing, but I want to make sure my emails are friendly. I want to make sure they're correct. So I'll use it for that. A coworker of mine, when she writes things super long and they don't need to be that long. So I'll copy and paste it into AI and I'll say, can you make this shorter and concise? And it'll, give me a few sentences instead of, that big old long thing. I had a friend's husband pass away and I asked AI to help me write like a sympathy note because I was struggling with like the words I wanted to use. I still had to personalize it, right? Because again, it doesn't know emotion, but it was just helping me kind of capture what I was thinking. Sometimes I'll throw out a bunch of ideas and I'll say like, make sense of this for me, right? I'm trying to do this, or, I have this idea and I have all these words and can you help me, make sense of this? Can you create a knock knock joke that uses these words? And, sometimes it's just fun to do things like that. But, I think doing things like Canva and having it help you with your images is a great thing. In my head, I'm trying to figure out how are we going to make sure in the future that people know, is this an actual photo or is this something that AI generated? So like, think about this. Thousands and thousands of years ago, we had the Egyptians build the pyramids and there's all these artifacts in Egypt, right? And all these things, and the archaeologists find the stuff and they say, oh, this must be how the Egyptians lived back then. And this was their life, right? There's all these elements, right? These I can't think of the word, but from the past. What's going to happen when 1,000 years from now, people look at our life and they're like, they had all these flying cars, right? Because like what's real and what's not. And are we going to let AI tell the story, or are we going to tell our own story? So things I'm always thinking about is like, well, if I used Canva to change my picture, should I note that somewhere? Right? If I'm posting it online and I'm like, look at my beautiful house, should I put a little note on there that says Canva cleaned up the trash in the background of my phone? I don't know. Right? But it's just something I think your generation's going to have to figure out. This is ethics, right? There's a big question with self-driving cars. Here's the question. This is a big ethics conversation. If your self-driving car has to make a decision to kill somebody on the road or to kill you in the car, what should it decide, right? Let's say it's like driving fast. Somebody walks into the street and the car has an option. It can run down that person, or it can veer off the road and probably hit a telephone pole, right? And hit, and have you in the car. What is it supposed to do? Like, that's humanity. Like, that's ethics, right? That's us thinking about our world and our place in the world. And AI doesn't know. And so I just am always thinking, when I think about how to use AI, I'm like, am I using AI for betterment, or am I using AI to fool somebody? Or, right? Like, wow, Laura, you live in the greatest house in the world. I'm like, no, I really don't. I said AI created for me. I don't know. I'm struggling with that place of its role in our lives. And I worry too that mental health, I don't want AI to create all these fake things where you look online and you think everybody's happy and better than you, and it's all AI generated, right? Like we have to consider our personal needs and our health and well-being, and where does AI fit with that? So it's a fine line.
Yes, I also think that there's some people that are so invested in making virtual lives and virtual things when they should probably invest more in self and like in themselves and their own lives. And one thing I do think is negative is with children, because I help some of them out with homework and those things, and they know the information, it's in their brains, but they think, oh, it will be much easier if I just Google it or those things, or if someone tells me, but they know it. And so what you can see is like, you tell them, oh, how do you spell this? And so you just have to give them a couple seconds or a minute or two, and they will figure it out. Which I think is the problem with Google and those things, is they could just grab their phone and be like, oh, what is it? When
Yeah.
they have the information, they have the knowledge. It's just they think that they don't with their self-esteem, and they think they need AI and those things.
Well, and our attention spans have gotten shorter, and that's documented. Like, there's science behind that, right? That when I was growing up, I could sit and read, a book for hours and hours and hours. Now, if I'm on TikTok and the video is more than 20 seconds, I don't even want to keep watching it. Like, that's ridiculous, right? That I don't have that attention span. And so that's what's happening with education, is there's this battle between, we want you to have all these experiences, and yet we also know, because of the way that your generation's been raised with social media, your brain is wired different than ours, and so like you said, is I don't want to take the time to figure out how to spell out this word, right? Or, oh, I don't want to do long division when I have a calculator on my phone. So where's the line there of, but this is important, and maybe some things aren't. Maybe we don't need to do long division anymore. Don't listen, Mr. Bunn. I'm not saying that, right? But what I'm saying is, like, we have to figure out what is critical and what are we okay with the machines doing. If we're all fine with calculators, then we're all fine with calculators. If we're fine not knowing cursive writing anymore because computers can figure that out, fine. But like, where is that line drawn between what we still need to know for humanity's sake and what we're okay with machines taking over and knowing for us?
Yes, I do think that we have to have like our own basis of knowledge, because I have been told before, like I knew some people who had trouble spelling, and I was like, they could get some help with tutoring and helping them spell, and they can study a little bit more. But then I've been told that they don't need to know how to spell, that they
Right.
can just use Google and those things, which I do understand for the bigger words, but I do believe they should be able to spell a majority of them by themselves, just for themselves.
And there's a lot of words that are very similar to each other. So if you don't know how to spell, how do you know that you have the right word? And different words have different meanings, right? So if you just trust Google or your iPhone, Siri, to spell things for you, you could be sending a message that you didn't mean to send because it uses a similar word and you don't know the difference.
Yes, and then the other thing with cursive writing, I do believe that there's not such a big need, but I do believe you should know like basic, because are you going to really trust AI to tell us what cursive and what it's saying to us? Because it could be like an important document, but you're just like putting so much trust into computers and those things to read it for you.
Mhm.
Because what if it's trained? What if it's completely different? Because people are in charge of computers. So what if they change it into something they want you to believe into?
And
So I
that's the key for AI. So there was a book that came out quite a few years ago before AI was as big as it is now. And the book was called You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. And they were talking about how they were building AI at the time. And what they said was AI only knows based on what you fed it. Okay. So if I want to build my own AI and I feed it only information about people who live in Southern California, how good is it going to do up in Maine when it's talking about like weather patterns, right? It's gonna only know what I fed it. So it only knows about Southern California. It's like the weather's perfect all the time. And then the people in Maine are gonna say, you didn't tell us there was a snowstorm coming. Like, what is wrong with you, right? It doesn't know. So you bring up such an important point is machines are built by humans. Humans have limitations, right? We know we have biases, we have our opinions, we have based on our experiences growing up, we're all different in this room, right? We have different foods, different everything. So the machine only knows what I choose to put into the machine. And if I leave out a big stack of information, all of its decisions are going to be made without that information. So we have to stop saying the machine is smarter than us. It's not. It's so limited based on what you feed it.
Mm-hmm. And
If I
as
never
humans,
give you vegetables, then how can you tell me that vegetables taste bad? You don't know, right? And that's the problem with AI right now is it doesn't know.
yeah, I just believe that students need to be taught to be more confident within their own skills and that
Yes.
they have so much potential. You can learn
Yes.
so much just if you let yourself do it. So I think that's just, and I think we'll lead off to our last question and end it here.
Uh-huh.
I think Elisa, you have the last question, right?
Yeah. So, will it be advanced to the point where AI will take over the world, like in all the sci-fi movies?
I hope not. No, I don't think so. The thing is humanity is we're pretty creative and we're pretty strong. And so AI will keep advancing with us, right? And it's going to get pretty smart. And I think there are going to be certain jobs that are no longer around because AI will replace certain jobs. We're hearing about that already. You know, there's a lot of things it can do for us. And that's also just a lot of machine learning that it's doing for us. Will we ever be Terminator? I hope not. And that's the other thing. When you look at AI in movies, it's always bad, right? I mean, there's never a movie that says because of AI, we live a better life. In all the movies, there's always, oh no,
I have a
AI.
counterpoint.
Okay, hold on. And so I think because we see that in movies, it keeps in our mind that we need to just be thinking about our use of AI. Just always keep it on the forefront. Hit me with your counterpoint.
I do. What does that sound? I do 100% believe that AI will take over the world eventually. Let me explain to you why. You are 100% correct. AI only knows what we feed it. The problem is we don't know when to stop feeding it. If you give a child that's over 700 pounds a burger, it's going to eat it. If you give it another burger, it's going to keep eating. That's what the AI does. If you give it food, but you expect it not to eat, you should always expect it to eat. We don't know when to stop giving it information. And AI that will, okay, humanity is stupid. Eventually, they're going to allow AI to have access to all things. And once the AI is as smart as a human, it's over. I mean, we basically have a metallic human. And that human knows what it's doing.
I'm not gonna say you're wrong. I'm gonna say I'm hopeful that you're wrong.
There is one thing though.
All the
wants
movies,
a robot apocalypse.
yeah, all the movies say that you're right. So you know, we can only hope that you're right, that we don't feed it too much. You know, we put it on a diet.
Yeah, nobody wants the robot apocalypse.
There is one thing though. We have two sides. So there is people that believe AI will take over and others that don't. So I believe if they work together, it will not take over because there's always going to be people that say that we should not feed it more. And then there's always like in companies, there are going to be two sides. And so I believe they will come to the best decision and they will be able to manage it. Since not everyone's not like AI crazy.
And
things
lacks
dependency.
Say that again.
Humanity lacks independence. I don't think that they can live without AI.
Well,
They
I mean,
have
we were
before.
living without AI up until a few years ago, and that's the thing is there will always be something new. Something else is going to come out, right? Like it's AI
Gen
now,
Z's fault.
we used to be augmented reality, then we had virtual reality, and you don't really see people walking around with the goggles on that we thought they were going to do.
Yeah.
And AI is big right now, and AI is not going anywhere because in many aspects it makes our lives easier. And like I said, it's going to take away a lot of jobs that tend to be like entry-level jobs, right? Or jobs that maybe people who aren't as educated get. It's going to take away those lower paying jobs because companies can make more profit by not hiring people. But we just have to keep an eye on it and hope.
Well, if it does, it'll bring new different types of jobs. There's always, I feel like there's always been new jobs and always adding new departments. Like esports is a new department in a lot of colleges, so they're always adding on to. I think always have jobs.
And that's
but
like
I
the
do
whole
want to open
ethics.
up. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying the whole ethics realm is all new jobs now. Companies that are tech are now hiring people to help them make ethical decisions that did not exist before.
Which is why I always think it's so important to just like for us to always keep in mind that we might have a job that is not even real right now, but in the future we'll have it. But I did want to open it up to everyone can ask you questions if they want to, and then we'll end it off after that.
Sure.
So if anyone has any questions, they can ask them now.
I did have so you guys were talking about virtual reality. There is obviously headsets that they already have, which is the Quest 1, Quest 2, the Quest 3, and the Quest Pro, which the Quest Pro is more for working purposes. So that's one way I think that workers aren't going to be like, because already as it is, Japan, they have robots walking around in restaurants, and people are working from home in a restaurant in like robot form. And the Apple Vision Pro just came out, and that's one way of explaining AI on that, like just the stuff on there, it's just like it already knows what you're doing. Like it has face tracking, everything like that. And I think it's just gonna become more advanced from that.
I agree. And maybe like those goggles that are real big right now eventually are going to be like Mr. Smith's glasses, right? Remember Google Glass, Mr. Smith, came out a long time ago and they tried to be the first ones out there. They were too expensive. And you're right, Seth. Eventually, you're all going to have something where you're going to be like in the real world and also maybe connected, right? So maybe you're like walking down the street and your maps is on your eye, right? And so you're not looking at your phone to see which turn, but it's just right there in front of you. We see that already in cars. It's up on the windshield. So I think you're right.
The other thing is that I don't know if you've heard, but Elon Musk has already came up with a chip that goes into your head.
Yep.
I don't know what it's for, but I think it's for something like, so like for your Tesla. I think, I don't know, but it's
the neural link.
Yeah, and he's already came up with that. So imagine like once you put that chip in your head and he gives it more updates. Like you don't even need glasses on. You just opened up the maps and you'll just look crazy. Just just moving your hand and like.
What if Elon Musk decides he doesn't like you anymore and just like wants to turn off your Neuralink?
Good point.
But those are the questions people are asking. I think the first human just got injected with the Neuralink. I think it was in the news not too long ago. So, we used to laugh and say it's never going to come to reality, but he is doing it. But these are the ethic questions, right? So if somebody decides, oh, Seth, we don't need Seth anymore. Let's have him take like a long nap and we'll catch up with him tomorrow. Can they do that? Is that ethical? Right? If Mr. Smith's like, I'm going on a long drive and I really just want my son to sleep on the entire drive, can you use that Neuralink to say, hey, take a nap for 5 hours so we get to our destination? I don't know. That's machine learning. That's the difference, right? That's not quite artificial intelligence. That's machine learning, but it's the same concept of how much control are we willing to let technology have in our lives.
Regarding to the example that you gave for like the house picture, not like generative AI for pictures, but Grammarly is already starting to do this thing where almost every single time that you start writing on Grammarly and use its AI form of generative text, it'll start, there's like a small button at the bottom and it says, I can't remember what it's called, but it citates that you're using Grammarly in the that it's being used.
Yeah. And it, like even Google, right? When you're typing an email and it wants to finish the sentence for you, it's kind of creepy. But
It tries to
honestly,
learn you. Yeah.
it does, because most of the time, like that is exactly what I was going to say, right?
like
That's predictive text.
Like taking your words from you. I was writing an assignment today in Google Docs, and it's like I was writing about economics, and I was writing it's the study of, and then Google wants to finish the sentence for me. I'm like, I'm not even cheating. It's just it's doing it for me already.
Yeah.
So I'm like, do we have to handwrite it now?
And there are some schools, traditional schools, who are doing that. So if you look in the news right now, and honestly, this is what happens in education. So anytime something new comes out in education, educators kind of freak out about it, and we want to control it. So this goes all the way back to calculators, to pens, to just the internet. It was always, we have to control this. So because there's so much AI right now, there's a lot of schools, even colleges now, that are saying like no more laptops in class. You have to go back to paper and pen, which is super sad, right? Because there's so much power in technology, especially that you're writing an essay. So when I was growing up and we type our essay, so then if I had a mistake or I wanted to move something, I had to throw that paper away and start typing all over again. Whereas now I can copy and move it and say, oh, I like how that sounds better, and I'm going to shift this over here, and I'm going to try this out. And so it makes me sad to see some educational institutions saying the answer is just to remove your access to technology. That's not the answer. The answer is to help you think critically and stay curious and stay questioning and have strong ethics so that you make good decisions with it.
And showing you how to stay safe with it, because once you finish school, you're going to use it,
right?
And you don't know like all the rules and how you can stay safe.
If I never taught you how to drive or be safe, and then one day I just gave you your license and the keys to $100,000 car, like that's not really smart, right? Like we teach you and we take you out for lessons and we put you behind the wheel and we do all these things, and then even when you get your license, they put limitations until you get better. And so I mean, I think you have to do the same thing with technology.
Because now you have to like. Oh, I'm sorry.
You could go.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I was just saying now you have to like prepare them into going into the world of technology and how it's different. So you can't really hold them back that way. And then when they get a job, they're gonna have to use a computer and they're gonna have to use those tools, but they don't know how.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, I did look at the news. There is new AI technology that's already helping people get treated from their strokes, like help like with like strokes.
Yeah.
And also, on the Oculus, I have this game. It's called Gorilla Tag, and on video games, you can't even be safe with your own address because AIs just go into games and then start reading your logs from like the video game, and it's just scary. Like you can't even be safe with your own address.
Right. Remember I said never put any sort of personal information. Keep it off of any sort of chat, computer, type of situation, as minimal as possible. Do you ever want to share anything personal?
I would like to ask a question, and if no one else has questions, and this could be the last question. But just how do you want to see personally in education change AI? Like, is there anything that you personally want to see us put in AI for education?
I think there's a place for AI in education, and I'm hopeful that what education does is that it starts to really work on kind of freeing your mind. Like that's what I want to see. Is I want to see education partner with AI and say, hey, let's not waste our time on these little things, but let's use AI so that you have more time to do the big things, right? I want you to be able to write the poem that's in your mind without panicking that you don't know the correct spelling of a word. So if we can use AI in a way that unlocks the potential of what you have, right? We all have something magical that we've either said like, oh, if only I could, or I would love to do this, or, I have this idea, but I'm not sure what to do with it. I want education to partner with AI to open that possibility for you, instead of saying, well, it's too bad you can't spell. Well, it's too bad you don't know cursive, so we'll never know that Shakespearean sonnet that's in your head because you can't do this thing. I want AI to partner with us so that you can do all those things that you're meant to do.
Looks like Matthias had a question.
Okay, so I seem to have heard you guys talking about how AI benefits businesses. Now, honestly, I really want to look into that because it's so ironic you talk about businesses while I'm in the process of sparking my own.
There's a huge market. I mean, I think AI is going to be in every single business. You should, if you have any inclination to be an entrepreneur or to work in the business industry, you definitely need to see how AI can support you.
That sounds great. I mean, it literally in my name tag, I have part of my business name. It's called Ether Paradise. Yeah,
Nice.
I don't know where I got this idea, but I'm like, hey, wait,
Well,
if I'm going to have a YouTube channel, I want to have some sort of like link, something I can support at the same time while supporting myself. And I'm like, hold up, I can have my own business to the side. I'm making money, I'm making more money, and I'm making extra money.
there you
Like,
go. There you
and
go.
AI is going to make it so much easier.
It
That
is
sounds
doing
great.
that. It is. You will see that if you go and look up influencers and how they're using AI. It's helping them create the videos. It's helping them create the marketing. It's helping them figure out which hashtags work at which times of the day, right? It's doing all that insight analysis so that you're connecting with your audience in a way that's going to make you that money.
That sounds great. Thank you. I'm definitely going to look into that.
Mr. Smith will help you out there.
Well, I think since no one else has any questions, then I'll hand it off to Elisa for the outro. Sorry, I was going to say intro, but for the outro.
Thanks for coming to this episode of the Be Elite podcast, and make sure to follow us on social media and YouTube. So see you guys all next week.
Awesome. Thank
Bye.
you.
Flying high above the